guys, welcome to the stream. I hope the video quality and audio quality is okay. I don't need these anymore. Okay, bit of a seminar today, or educational discussion we'll call it, about the criminalisation / regulation of gel blasters in South Australia. So I have 6 viewers in the channel. I might give it another minute or so, see if anyone else comes in. But I guess 6 viewers is better than nil. I've got a few comments. I've got History Squad wanting to see a bit of nip, and Josh Bellamy a question about compressed air, and I will cover that because I'm going to go into the regulations and the legislation itself and explain how that fits in and what SA Pol are doing and the way they're approaching this. So I'm going to get stuff up on the screen now. Alright, hold on a second. Whoops. Here we go. Okay. Alright guys, so I'll start with a bit of a disclaimer. So, I'm a solicitor in Queensland, but I mean, that's irrelevant to this discussion. It's irrelevant because this isn't legal advice. Number one, not legal advice. Don't rely on this information, okay? This information I'm telling you here should be given the same credence as a random website on the internet. Don't rely on this. If you've been charged with a firearm offence in South Australia or something, don't rely on this and show it to the judge and say this is what Schultz said, because I mean it's just silly. You've been told not to do it. This is simply research into South Australian firearms regulations. Freely available information on Austlii and Google. It's opinion only. I mean, I'm merely reading the words and applying a common sense reading of the words, which, as it happens, is how courts apply the legislation and how generally legislation should be read. Just reading a plain and simple understanding of the words. So if you want formal legal advice, go and seek independent legal advice in your jurisdiction. Go and see a lawyer based on your specific circumstances. Don't rely on this. It's informative only. It's to promote a discussion and perhaps give some understanding to people who can then go and do their own research into the legislation themselves. But I just want to explain things to clarify things a little bit for people so they can sort of go ahead and do their own research and have a bit of a better understanding of how the law legislation works. So let's move on. How do I do that? All right. I'm having some technical difficulties here, guys. It's meant to be updating the window as I do it. It's not. Oh, great. Just bear with me. Sorry, I'm trying to get this working. It's meant to be we'll just do it this way. Okay. We'll just do it this way. Much easier. Okay, so definition of firearm in the South Australian Firearms Act. Section 4 Firearms Act 2015, disclaimer, not legal advice. I've got to put this into every slide. So, disclaimer, not legal advice. So, firearm means a device designed to fire bullets, shot or other projectiles by means of burning propellant or by means of compressed air or other compressed gas, or a device of a kind declared by the regulations to be a firearm, an antique firearm, or a device of a kind declared by the regulations not to be a firearm. So you've got two sort of avenues for a gel blaster to become a firearm there. Firstly, it can fit within subsection A. Now that subsection A is interesting because that's based upon almost like a national firearms definition. So that actually is fairly consistent through various jurisdictions. Queensland, South Australia, Victoria, I certainly know that's the definition they use. So you've got that compressed air, compressed gas element. You've also got the bullets, shot, or other projectiles. Okay, so that's interesting. But there's two avenues there. So you've got this avenue here. If I can highlight it, you've got this avenue here. And you've got then the second avenue, which is declared by the regulations to be a firearm. Now, that's not common between all the jurisdictions. That's fairly unique to South Australia, but I haven't cross-checked it with every other jurisdiction. But that's interesting. That's the interesting part of this. Okay, so the regulations themselves can sort of specify what a firearm is and isn't. It's not just based upon this definition. So I highlight those points there, and I can move on from that. But you've got two sort of within this first definition, two I guess potential arguments arising from that. So a firearm has to shoot bullets, shot, or other projectiles, and it's also got to shoot them by means of compressed air or compressed gas. If it doesn't shoot it by compressed air, of a burning propellant, or i.e. gunpowder, or compressed air or compressed gas, so like some sort of spring or something, a spring-loaded thing might then not be a firearm, irrespective of what it shoots, but it could be declared a weapon or firearm or another type of weapon elsewhere in the legislation. But that's just those particular arguments, and they're interesting because moving on to the next slide here. We've got two cases that are relevant to this particular definition up here. So the first case is Customs versus Clark, and that's 14 December 2007. That's an unreported case. And that dealt with bullets, shot, and other projectiles, so that first part there. And you got Police versus Elicides, which is a 2020, a recent case coming out of Victoria. Now, the case in Victoria actually cited the Clark case, didn't rely on it, but ran the same logic and ran the same argument, and both those cases focused on bullets, shot, or other projectiles. They didn't talk about the compressed air or the compressed gas avenue. Okay, so they focused on that, and next slide here I kind of go into this a little bit. Those cases focus on bullets, shot, or other projectiles. Now, there's a principle, in a legal principle that I looked up on Wikipedia, because this isn't legal advice, and don't rely on this, but this is the principle, iusdem generis. Okay, and hold on a second. Silence that. Iusdem generis, effectively what it does, and I'll make it. This is layman terms. So a list of words creates a class of things. So bullets, shot, or other projectiles. So effectively, what it means is when you have a list of words in legislation, the list of words creates like a class, okay, like a category sort of. So the arguments in both these cases, you had bullets, shot, or other projectiles. So what the argument is there, that bullets and shot are inherently lethal things. A bullet and shot can kill you, like a shot from a shotgun and a bullet's they're inherently lethal. So the effectively the category that's established there is that bullet shot and other projectiles refers to sort of inherently lethal things that are dangerous and can kill you. So the argument in those cases was that other projectiles wasn't intended by the government or the legislature to cover harmless gel pellets that disintegrate and cause a tiny, tiny red mark. They're not in that lethal category. And so the lack of lethality and injury caused by gel balls effectively, the argument in both those cases succeeded that other projectiles not intended to cover gel balls. I hope I've been sufficiently clear. Leave a comment if I'm not being clear on that. But that's generally what those cases were doing. But the thing is, the definition of firearms in South Australia, and this is where it's interesting. And Joshua Bellamy, if you're watching, the way that SA police have gone in WA is not in that subsection A. They're completely going away from that. And they're relying on subsection B, which is a device declared by the regulations to be a firearm. So they're moving away from that definition because, in my view, if they rely on that first category, they risk those other two precedents potentially being used against them, and they could lose based on that, given the definitions are identical. So they've gone this other avenue. So in my view, that first part here is not that relevant anymore to the South Australian argument about gel ball. The police commissioner or superintendent mentioned compressed air. So what they're doing is they're trying to bring gel blasters into all of the definitions. They're trying to say, well, they are firearms anyway because of that definition, but they're inevitably moving towards this second way of categorizing them as firearms, which I will move on to now. Let me look here. What's interesting though, and I found this just before, the firearm regulations were enacted in 2017. 23 May 2017, these regulations came into force. Regulated imitation firearms were added to the regulations in May 17. The Clark case wasn't until December 2017, but I imagine, given how long it takes for matters to get to court, the seizures of those items might have occurred well before. I'm not exactly certain of the dates there. Maybe I'm not exactly certain. It's an unreported case, and it's quite difficult to get access to the judgment on that one. But given the lag in the court system, probably earlier in 2017. So was this a attempt by the SA government in 2017 to preempt gel blasters? Did they see this coming? I'm really curious about that, because that's 3 years ago, and as you'll find out in a minute, that legislation they enacted then has basically been the death knell for gel blasters in South Australia now. So did they see this coming? It's really interesting. Did they, these organisations are communicating. They're not insular to one another. They talk. They probably all get together once a year or more than that and discuss these things. And so did they see this coming? Did they predict it? You've got these two other parts. I've been over that already. Okay. So this is in the regulations, Firearm Regulations 2017. So you've got this part here, a device of a kind declared by the regulations to be a firearm. So we go to the regulations, and this is what's being declared to be a firearm. Pursuant to paragraph B of the definition of firearm, a regulation imitation firearm is declared to be a firearm. A regulation imitation firearm is a device that can be adapted to function as a firearm with moderate exercise of effort and skill, and is constructed of material of sufficient strength such that if it were adapted to function as a firearm, be capable of sustaining the firing of ammunition, paintballs, air gun pellets, or other similar projectiles. Now, the difficulty here, and what this, in my view, effectively does, is it creates almost a new category, because you've got that argument of bullet, shot, or other projectile, but what we can do when we're interpreting legislation is we can look to other parts of the legislation to help us interpret what the government meant when it wrote that legislation. So you've got this section in the regulations here talking about ammunition, paintballs, air gun pellets, or other similar projectiles. So the ius dum generis argument in the Clark and the Alisades case kind of struggles now, because you've got almost a less lethal class of projectiles being created here through ammunition, paintballs, air gun pellets, or other similar projectiles, and it lessens the lethality. We're not just talking about bullets and shotgun pellets. Section. Craig has just made a comment there. Anyway, I'll get to that. So you've got regulation imitation firearm here. So you've got that can it be adapted to function as a firearm, and is it constructed of sufficient strength that if it were adapted, could it sustain the firing of less lethal ammunition, i.e. air gun pellets, potentially BBs, potentially airsoft, and I think and I'll get onto this, I think that's basically what this section of legislation talks about. Okay, you've got those two important elements there, and this is what this is a regulation imitation firearm, and Craig, thanks for your comment, but the superintendent, if you look at the SA Poll website, and I think I can find, if you Google South Australia gel blasters, the very first thing that comes up, and I'll post this into the chat, the very first thing that comes up is that the police are in fact declaring them as regulated imitation firearms. So this section we're looking at now is the section that police are relying on, not section 4.4. Not anything can be a firearm. They're actually using the pre-existing legislation here. It says it on the police website, regulation imitation firearms. So what they're effectively saying is that these gel blasters can be converted in such a way that they're capable of firing airgun pellets, i.e. potentially airsoft BBs. So that's the question we need to ask ourselves. Can a gel blaster be converted with moderate effort of skill into something that can fire paintballs, airgun pellets, or other similar projectiles? That's the question. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if anyone watching has experience with modding or converting, but I've got this next slide here. Effectively, I obviously got a picture there of some airsoft 8mm BBs. The question is, how easy is it to convert a gel blaster into something that fires airsoft? And I mean, I'm not an expert modder, but I do mod, and anyone who does mod knows this is an airsoft gearbox. An AEG gearbox is virtually identical to a gel blaster gearbox. Okay, I've got another one here. You can see the internal workings there. You've got the cylinder, you've got the gears, they're identical, trigger unit, spring, cylinder head. you know, the difference is not much. Okay, I think they're well and truly aware of this. I think maybe 3 years ago they weren't, but I think they certainly are now. So, an imitation firearm is anything that can be converted with moderate effort and skill into something that can fire paintballs, airgun pellets, or other similar projectiles. So, can a gel blaster be converted with moderate effort and skill into something that shoots a paintball gun? That's the question. I think personally, my opinion, again, not legal advice, you know, but my opinion is that the answer is pretty obviously yes. And I think SA police are well and truly aware of this. The difference between both a gel blaster and we've got the comments in the way there, but it is effectively all this here is identical, is almost the same. The difference is at the end there, this T-piece, the nozzle, and the barrel is more narrow. So these three simple parts allow the conversion. Okay, although, and I will note, this is an instruction manual, but this is just fact. They are illegal. You can't import them. They're if airsoft parts are illegal to import. You've got them here in Australia. You're committing firearms offences. So don't do that. But again, disclaimer, not legal advice. So, but then you've got, so that's I think that's fairly clear. This is, in my view, what they're relying on. This really simple part, the regulated imitation firearm. If you look at the website there, that's what police are in fact declaring what they are. Based on this section, in my view, this is what I think. I think that SA Pol has been maybe a bit confused leading up to yesterday, or they've been keeping their cards closer to their chest before they got maybe final legal advice. I don't know, but in my view, this is the section they're using. It might be different. I mean, really, to hash this out, you'd have to effectively someone would have to be caught with one, possession of one, and would have to challenge it, take it to court, and then they'd have to play their cards as to how they're going to prosecute this, and they'd have to then take the court, I imagine, through all this legislation, and then it might be argued. But anyway, so we'll move on there. So that's the first. Certain devices are declared to be firearms. This is, in my view, all they need, and this was in 2017. This was already there. So this section, anyone who knows anything about gel blasters, this section has been there for 3 years, has been sitting there silently like a silent killer, has been waiting there. This isn't new. And that they didn't, haven't activated this section like a sleeper cell earlier. I don't know, but it's been there since May 17. It's been lurking. Well, look, Josh, I don't know if Brad Towner, my understanding, was in New South Wales. I have only prepared for South Australia. New South Wales, I'm not going to stop and research in the middle of the stream to look at that, but that's the thing. Each jurisdiction has slightly different ways they've adopted this. If they'd been uniform, then maybe we might be in a different place, but each jurisdiction has their own little idiosyncrasies in their legislation. This is particular to South Australia and what South Australians done. That's why they're legal in Queensland, or regulated, and illegal in South Australia and Victoria and stuff. Okay, so moving on, where are we? Look, Craig, you're mentioning 4.4. I'll bring it up. I'll have a look at it, and I'll if you want to put up a link to your email or something you're talking about, go ahead, feel free. So this is the second section of the definition of firearm here. You've got of a device of a kind declared by the regulations to not be a firearm. So the regulations can say what is a firearm and what isn't a firearm. Regulation 5 of the firearms regulations in South Australia say, pursuant to this definition, a device designed for the purposes of children's play, i.e. a children's toy that fires toy projectiles, is declared not to be a firearm. Now, toy projectiles obviously include Nerf. Okay, so obviously there's that you read that and you think, oh well, no, gel blasters are toys. Maybe they fit within that definition, but I don't think they can, and I don't think they can because they've actually expanded this. But this is why Nerf, although Nerf might compress gas or whatever, they clearly shoot toy projectiles, so toy arrows, toy darts and stuff like that. This section sort of says, no. Children's toys are definitely not firearms. Okay, so you look at that. But they've expanded that. You've got paragraph 1, you've got subsection 2 there. Now they say for the avoidance of doubt, so in my view, when they say that, they're sort of just trying to say, no, to be 100% clear, a children's toy does not include, and they specifically say this, a device known as that or is similar to a BB gun, a device known as or that is similar to an airsoft gun, or a device that is a regulation imitation firearm. So you've got two elements there of Regulation 5 specifically saying, no. There is no way in hell airsoft guns or regulated imitation firearms can be children's toys. There is no way in hell. There's two specific sections in there saying, hey guys, to avoid any doubt whatsoever, don't even think about it. Don't even think about including airsoft guns or imitation firearms into children's toys. No way, Jose. You've got those two sections there. Now, we've been through regulation imitation firearms, something that could be strong enough or easily converted into effectively airsoft or a BB gun, okay? Which most people who know about gel blasters know that regulation imitation firearms can in fact, or gel blasters can be converted to airsoft with the right parts. And the other aspect is a device known as or is similar to an airsoft gun. And the word similar to an airsoft gun, all they would need to do is have a weapons expert break down a gel blaster to say, yeah, you're right, Josh, the 100% on point. South Australia went into detail, actually mentioned airsoft in their weapons legislation. They actually mentioned it. Queensland never mentioned it. They thought, oh, we'll just cover it. But South Australia in 2017 screwed the industry over with this argument here. Okay? Now, what I think, in my view, the common phrase, the law is an arse. The law takes a while to catch up with everything. Okay? In 2017, well, what the hell are these things? Gel blasters? Oh, God. Boom. We won the Clark case was won. Oh, all right, okay. We'll have to let them in then. 1 million come into the state. And then the law police slowly work out what they are. And then by the time they sort of go, oh, look, these things are actually very, very similar to airsoft, it's too late. And the Queensland jurisdiction has to kind of then regulate the already massive industry and massive amounts of people with gel blasters. South Australia, there's only 62,000. They now have caught up and the whole country's caught up and they're like, nah, bang, we're going to put a nip it in the bud. So, anything similar, I think if you're talking about, trying to use this, then you've got this paragraph here for the avoidance of doubt. A device that's similar to an airsoft gun. I mean, it's just, it's known as or similar to an airsoft gun. I think there's a strong argument. Anyone who knows about gel blasters is going to fall into that. And then the a device is a regulated imitation firearm. I'll quickly jump back to that. Can it be converted with moderate effort and skill into a firing ammunition, paintballs, airgun, pellets? Okay, nothing there about appearance, which is interesting. I maybe might need to look into this a bit more. But I mean, look, that's pretty much what they're doing. So I'll give you a bit of a summary. So in my view, again, disclaimer, not legal advice. This isn't legal advice. My view, Schultz, reading these words in the anyone can look these up and have a look at them and come to a view, but just using a common sense approach. South Australia already in 2017 had screwed the gel industry over with their updated legislation, which was well ahead of its time, as we've seen. I think it appears to be adequate. They don't need to change anything. It's already aimed at airsoft and things that are similar to it. They've now hardened their stance and sort of basically gone, no, we're going to actually properly enforce this legislation before it gets out of hand. I don't think there's that many loopholes in the legislation due to the extra steps taken in Regulation 4 and 5, as we've been through, that sort of deal with less lethal firearms, i.e., yeah, well, yeah, you're right, Craig, it's probably way more. They say 62,000. I don't know how they got that figure. I'm just going off the website. So, look, I think it'd be interesting due to see the route taken in any legal challenge. What would the legal challenge be, given they specifically include airsoft and things similar to airsoft as not being children's toys? It's hard to. They have contemplated airsoft. They've dealt with airsoft. It's hard to use a loophole in the law, I guess, to say, well, you mentioned airsoft specifically, but we're going to be wordsmiths and go, no, but the words don't particularly cover airsoft by way of its operation. If you look at, and I didn't go this deep, but you could go to like a parliamentary, like a second reading speech or something, and see what the minister at the time said about airsoft and about these imitation firearms and why they were attempting to ban them too, because those comments in Parliament can form part of legal arguments. Now, look, Craig's going on about using 4.4, and I want to have a quick look at that because I'm almost at the end of the seminar, and section 4.4 of the regs. So, if you got any other questions, chuck them in the comments now, because Josh, I think we've covered the compressed gas argument in that they're not going that way anymore. They're going around that other defined by regulations, and then they're now they're going that route. So they're going away from bullet shot and other projectiles and compressed gas, and they're moving towards that regulation route defined by regulation. So I think I've addressed Josh's question. Craig, I'm going to have a look at this. So the registrar may, by notice in the Gazette, declare an item of a specified class to be a regulated imitation firearm. So yeah, Craig, answering your question there, they are subsection 4 in regulation 4 of that is the means in which the registrar can make that declaration. So in this particular case, they are the registrar may, by notice in the Gazette, declare an item of a specified class, i.e. in this case they're saying gel blasters are regulated imitation firearms. I imagine that particular declaration will be the one that is being challenged by the class action potentially. But if they are going to challenge that, then they need to get over this. So this section here might well be what the court challenge is about in South Australia. Airgun paintballs, airgun pellets, or other similar projectiles. The difficulty with that is we're not just talking about what it does, we're talking about what it can do with moderate skill. And what it can do with moderate skill, how can you change a gel blaster into something else? What could it do if you changed it with moderate exercise of effort and skill? That's the problem. That's a big problem, because we, like, you know, they're no. I'm not. That's why it's called short straight talk. We know what they are. Gel blasters are effectively airsoft guns light. So what do we do? Because if this is the regulations, how do we get around that? Look, next steps. I've got some next steps here. Just, again, opinion. Look, governments can always change the laws irrespective of if loopholes are found. So even if we win in South Australia on the regulation imitation firearm, the government down there and SA Pol have pretty much played their hand and sort of said, look, we want to ban gel blasters. We want them to have weapons licenses. They've not even contemplated any sort of sensible regulations like they did in Queensland. Even if a loophole's found, even if a class action is won, then it's 12 months max. Either the government's going to back down and go, oh, okay, well, you won that, well, we're not going to push this, or they're just going to amend the regulations in a very simple way, in a simple, not even a vote from Parliament, and make them make a new category. Just amend the definition of imitation firearm to say water-soaked projectiles or something. And if they do that, then virtually the case will be lost if it's challenged again. So they can do that. So if any loopholes are found, they're going to be closed very quickly. You're not going to get a floodgate situation like you did in Queensland, because the law has caught up with gel blasters. They know what they are. They know what they can do. They see what happens when you let hundreds of thousands into a state and the state's too slow to react. The industry gets established. A protest body gets established, and they effectively, they're fun for kids and all that, and lots of kids get into them. People like them. People realize they're not harmful at all, and they love them. And then you have a situation where the government fears votes swinging against it. In particular, I mean, Queensland's hanging on by a thread. They don't want anything that's going to turn an election. So, that's what happens when you let the floodgates open. So if you do find a loophole, it's going to be shut. We've seen how it happened in Queensland. Governments aren't going to repeat the same mistake. My opinion is that the solution is law reform, lobbying, 4 points, a unified national body, a strong force, thousands and thousands, 50, 100,000 members strong lobby fighting for gel ball and or airsoft. Work it out what you want to do. You work out, do we may as well argue for airsoft given the similarities? Is it a bit of a silly thing to have airsoft illegal and gel blasters not illegal? Do we fight for the Airsoft Gel Ball Association of Australia? Do we form one big giant body? We roll in all these little clusters of associations into one powerful force. We have a mature, sensible approach to regulation, to law reforms. In my view, the associations, the community should be the ones coming up with ideas for regulation, not the governments. And we should have be able to have a credible sit-down chat with them and talk about regulations that are sensible and actually work. Queensland is an example of proper regulation, and how it can be done right and how it can be managed properly, and by balancing public safety, against public fear, people running around being idiots, and I think the toy argument is not mature. It's not advanced. We need to drop that argument and accept, and I'll move my head, they're virtually the same, as they're very similar, as long as they are within that same, as long as they look like airsoft, and which are quite devastating, and they have the ability to be converted to airsoft. I mean, government's going to sus on them. Many jurisdictions around the world manage airsoft, like Queensland's managing gel ball. I think we need to set the example and lobby for, as a community, we can be mature and sensible with these things. We can enjoy the sport. We can self-regulate, as they do in the UK and other jurisdictions where they have airsoft. I think this South Australia thing isn't, it's not good news at all. But we have had a win in Queensland. We can form a beachhead and use Queensland. Craig's made a point, only illegal in 6 countries around the world. So that nanny state mentality. But I think, how do we get it through? We prove that we can be sensible. And I think a national strong force, a strong national body, is the way forward. I'm talking about lobbyists, lawyers, professionals, weapons experts, resources, skill sets, all combined into one unified strong force who can go and legitimately speak to governments. I mean, I'm going to go out and say it when, the jail, oh God, the jail blaster people are coming to have a chat, like that, that they're taken seriously. That's it. Oh, okay, we're going to have a chat, and then they've got some good ideas. They accept the dangers. They accept what they are. They accept the potential for public concern, and they accept that there needs to be regulations in place. And they accept the realities of this hobby. Okay, these are. Look at this. Full metal wells. These are fantastic. These are amazing. The game of gel ball is great fun. It's incredible. It gets you fit, gets you healthy, gets you out of the house, gets you socializing. There's so many benefits to it. But we've got to accept. You run into some grandma's house down the street with one of these, they're going to freak out. We got to go, look, how do we do that? Can they be converted to airsoft? We've got to manage that. So look, that's pretty much the presentation, guys. They're my comments. Thanks for your input. Craig, thanks for your input. Thanks for your questions, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Again, disclaimer, not legal advice, just my opinion, just my view. Any questions, leave them in the chat afterwards. If you're watching this after the stream ends, leave them in the chat. I'll try and answer them. Full metal wells. I got the nylon wells, and I've got a full metal receiver, and now it's nice and heavy. 12-to-1 gear set, 11-1 battery, and a high-speed motor, or a high-torque motor, and my CQB Devastator. Anyway, guys, thanks for tuning in. Really appreciate it. Comments, I'll try and answer them as best I can after the fact. But cheers. Leave you with a bit of a soundtrack as we tune out. All right, guys. Catch you later.